you can't really just jump in at the end where you're like, I'm just going to start making a Joe Rogan style podcast.
He does certain things, like he has this way of making his guests feel very comfortable right away.
I think that's called marijuana. I'm not entirely sure, but...
Hi, you're listening to Pop-Up Podcasting. We make podcasting easy, so stick around for tips, tricks, and a behind-the-scenes look at the podcast industry. Hey, I'm Lisa, and in this episode, JP, Will, Ashlee, and I discuss coming up with a podcast topic, considering what you're passionate about and who your audience is.
How would somebody who wants to do a podcast come up with a successful idea?
Well, I mean, we don't have to tackle that question very often. So maybe if you can't think of a good topic for a podcast, start producing podcasts for other people. That's been my MO. No, but I think there are definitely clients who come to us with different ideas or maybe a series of ideas, and we try to provide some advice on that. And I think one of the biggest things is thinking about how expansive your series is going to be. Are you doing this once a month for 6 months, or are you doing it once a week and you want it to go on for years? And that might help to figure out how narrow or broad your topic should be, because you kind of want to find that sweet spot of not so broad that it's just not about anything, or that people can't really like latch on to like, oh, this is for me because it's about something I care about. But also not so narrow that you're like, you get to episode 3 and you're not sure what else to say about it.
So like if a business were, I guess, to come to you for a consultation and be like, I have this great idea, it's about our business, what would you then say to them?
Yeah, normally they would certainly have like at least like somewhat of a foundation for the idea, but obviously or not, it's for promotion of their business, right? Like I'm sure, yeah, they want to get these interesting conversations out there and connect with interesting people, all that. But at the end of the day, it's a networking tool and generally to raise the overall public awareness of their business. So, I mean, I think it's how you best marry that desire, because obviously, again, it comes down to driving the business, but how you marry that with your actual passion for it, right? So yeah, if you're in this finance world and you want to drum up business for what you do, but it's how does your passion for that then translate to the podcast, right? Because if you're just talking numbers or whatever, then that's not going to be compelling for people. But if you use your business as the sort of entry point to the conversation and then you expand on it from there, I think that's when you can be more successful with it. Again, this is my number one podcast I'm a fan of, possibly, but to go back to the Crow Patrol, the host of that podcast, I believe his name's Craig. You can listen to 5 minutes of that show and you know how passionate he is about subject matter. You know, when a guest tells him like a little story about some winter bird roost they've been tracking, and he's just like he's a captive audience as he's listening to the person, right? And he has genuine reactions to everything that they're saying. And I think that stuff's what really translates. So you want to find what makes sense for you in terms of sustainability for the show. Like, can I continue to book guests, or can I individually continue to talk about this subject? But you want to pair that with something that you actually care about, right? And you want to find that through line. And I think that's when you're going to find a show that will resonate with people and be sustainable as well.
Yeah. So the other side of this is thinking about the audience, right? And what's going to be useful to them or entertaining to them. And I think that can go out to like broader than even your topic or your theme is, you know, how long is it? Are you targeting like, you know, really busy professionals who just need like the quick hit of up-to-date information, or are you targeting people who are like, I want a lot of the podcasts I listen to, honestly, I listen to them because like they're good company for when I'm like doing chores, and like they're funny, and you know, they keep me company and they entertain me. But yeah, I think the internet's shown us that no matter how narrow your topic is, there's going to be some people who are interested in it. And I think podcasting is really great for those niche topics that maybe you think you're the only person who cares about it, or you're the only person in your small town that cares about it, but there's people around the world who care about it too. I think you need to bring yourself to it and your knowledge and your passion, like you guys have talked about. But I think you do want to add that element of what's going to be useful or entertaining to the audience as far as a topic goes. Is this a podcast for beginners in this area and we have to be really basic, or is it a podcast for enthusiasts and we're going to turn them off if we talk too much about the basics? At every stage in coming up with your podcast, you want to think about the audience at least a little bit.
JP, sort of a point that you touched on there that I hadn't really thought of before is like, because I'm also like this, like I have certain content I would listen to in like maybe different parts of my day or when I'm doing different things. I had never really thought about like I do it, I guess, unconsciously, but that's interesting that it's like, oh, this is something that, you know, if it's maybe very info heavy, right? It's like, yeah, maybe you want to trend a little bit shorter and know that people are probably going to have to be a little bit more focused when they listen to it, right? But whereas if you have more of a free flowing, more comedic leaning conversational style one, maybe you can go longer form with that, right? Because people are able to throw it on while they're cooking or driving or something and can be a little bit more distracted. But yeah, I had never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. There are podcasts out there that are very context specific. Geez, it's not great branded content because I can't remember which toothpaste brand, but like Crest or Colgate or one of those had a 2-minute podcast, because that's how long you're supposed to brush your teeth, for kids to listen to while brushing their teeth. So it's like
genius,
smart.
a fun story for kids. And when the story ends, you're done brushing your teeth.
Brilliant.
And then there's one, I use this meditation app called Headspace. They got Kevin Hart, the comedian, on as one of their sort of coaches or
That's funny.
or content providers or whatever. And he does like a specifically like Kevin Hart, like high energy kind of guy, motivational stuff to listen to while you're running. So it's a running podcast with Kevin Hart in your ear with you for the run.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it is cool that these kind of really specific context. And so those are situations where you're like, it's the topic and the format and the host and like everything kind of comes together, you know, in this great kind of puzzle. So it's, I guess, an example also of you can't really think of this stuff totally on its own, right? Like you want to think about your topic, but also the length and the audience and the individual topics for episodes. Like what are the first 10 episodes going to be about? All that stuff.
So it sounds very much like
together.
a marketing strategy.
I think even if you're doing a podcast where you just want, you know, where you're just doing it for fun, maybe you still probably want people to listen to it. And so I think those marketing things come into it, because if you're going to put all this work into putting something together and putting it out there, part of the reason we're doing this podcast and some of the other content we put out is to try to get people earlier in the process so that they're thinking about the things that we think about and maybe avoiding some of the pitfalls that we come across.
How much do you feel like, because I don't know, doing like a couple of consultations and stuff like that, the allure of the Joe Rogan style podcast, like, I don't know, it seems like a lot of people are just like, you know, I'm an interesting person. I know interesting people. Like I could sit down and talk for 3 hours and people will be into that. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's sort of like, there's a bit of that, like everyone's just trying to capture that same sort of magic, which is obviously, you know, hard to do. I don't know of a lot of other ones that are that successful. So I don't know. I feel like that's sort of like knowing yourself and again, your own situation and everything. And instead of just seeing something shiny out there, right. And being like, oh, I just want to do that.
Yeah.
Plus, I think that seems easy. Because I've watched quite a bit of Joe Rogan and he does certain things. Like he has this way of making his guests feel very comfortable right away, which can be hard to do.
I think that's called marijuana. I'm not entirely sure, but I think, yeah.
This magical way of making people feel comfortable.
Well, I just mean, if you watch it, he'll say something to draw them in right away, or maybe he compliments them, but in a way that is genuine.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I'm definitely joking about the drug side of things,
maybe.
Yeah. But a lot of people I feel like also have like, oh, I started watching his show or listening, whatever, like 5 years ago or something, when it's like, he was probably on like episode 700 or something at that point. Right. So, it, you know, when you look at, again, it's like easy to see the shiny object and be like, look at this show. It's, you know, yeah, you just sit down and hit record, but it's like, well, you know, he's done, however, is he over 1,000 episodes? I'm not even sure, but it's a lot of work and exercising that interview muscle a lot, right? To get to that point you're talking about, Lisa, where you can how to set someone at ease.
Yeah. And he was interviewing people for years before that, right? On UFC, he was a host, and he also was a host of Fear
that's
Factor.
A good point. Yeah.
So he would have had a lot of experience of dealing with uncomfortable and awkward situations probably before he got that hang of being able to be the kind of host that he is.
Yeah. Yeah. He's been I think he was a stand-up before all that, and an actor, and I think, it's easy to look at a success and say, I'm going to emulate that, but you can't really just jump in at the end, right?
Right.
Where you're like, I'm just going to start making a Joe Rogan style podcast. You have to go back to the beginning and be like, okay, I'm going to be a stand-up for 10 years, and then I'm going to be a TV host, and I'm going to make a lot of celebrity friends along the way. I mean, you guys have heard me say this before, but the breakout successes like Joe Rogan are exceptional, right? People like that are successful despite not following the rules. And I think some people look at podcasting and think, oh yeah, I'll be the next Joe Rogan. And I think that's not really realistic for most people. That's like starting a rock band in your garage and thinking you're going to be, to go back to my original example, Justin Bieber. That's from a different episode. So sorry, Ashlee, edits.
No, but I like what you're saying about that, because you brought it to this place of if someone wants to be, or they're looking at it as being famous or becoming really great at it or getting lots of listeners right away. Whereas I do think you could, if someone has a personal podcast and they want to take that type of format, but they're doing it because they're passionate about it and because they're a really curious person and that's what they love doing, then I think someone could totally do that. But, it's like the process, and they enjoy that versus expecting some certain outcome. And then I think that way over time you could learn and grow and get better, but you're not going into it with these expectations that are outweighing why you're doing it in the first place.
Yeah. If you want to be Justin Bieber, you don't start by booking a stadium for your next concert, right? You start by getting really good at singing and the drums, I guess, and whatever else, and dancing. You don't jump right to the end.
Thanks for checking out Pop-Up Podcasting Made Easy. If you're interested in learning more about podcasting or starting your own podcast, you can find us at popuppodcasting.ca, where you can download our free guide, Podcasting at Work.